My name is Callista Rowe. I never imagined that the beginning of the end would smell like imported cologne, stale champagne, and chicken skewers. But that's how it all started. On the night I served divorce papers to my husband at his long-awaited promotion party. For anyone watching from the outside, we were the perfect couple. Alec Rowe, my husband, was tall, refined, born with just the right balance of old money manners and modern ambition. The kind of man who could charm your grandmother and intimidate your father in the same breath. He worked at one of the top international law firms in London, just a 30-minute walk from our 4-bedroom Georgian home in Islington. People admired him, worshipped him even. And me? I was the quiet wife in the shadow of his spotlight, a woman with a literature degree and dreams of writing that dissolved slowly into endless evenings of business dinners, foundation meetings, and being paraded like a trophy to match his career. I was good at pretending I was happy. Too good, maybe, until I wasn't. It didn't happen overnight, but I remember the exact moment I began to unravel. A year ago, standing in the kitchen with a pile of laundry in one hand and a missed call from my mother flashing on my phone, I asked Alec if he could pick up the groceries on his way home. His response wasn't just a no. It was laced with something colder. "That's not really in my job description, is it?" And that's when it clicked. In Alec's world, my role was defined, not as an equal, not even as a partner. I was support staff, secretarial, optional. He loved the idea of me more than the reality of me. I spent the next few months documenting everything. The silent treatment, the microaggressions masked as jokes, the way his eyes lingered on other women when he thought I wasn't looking, the bank statements with late-night hotel charges when he was supposed to be out of town for business. I even found an Uber receipt to a flat in Chelsea. The name on the call sheet was Emily. Young, blonde, paralegal. Of course it was. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even confront him. I planned. I waited until the week of his promotion. I made sure the legal paperwork was watertight. I transferred half our savings into a private account, left no digital breadcrumbs, and made arrangements for a short-term lease in Notting Hill. Then I called every person I knew who owed me a favor, every lawyer friend, every college roommate, even my aunt, who knew someone at the Daily Telegraph, just in case I needed to go nuclear. And finally, I waited for the night of the party. It was held in the private lounge at the Langham. Velvet walls, chandeliers that looked like melting glass, waiters dressed better than most people on the street. Everyone who mattered was there. His boss, his partners, even the mayor of Camden. And Alec? He was in his element, dressed in a midnight blue tux, swirling his drink, his hand on the small of some junior associate's back. When I arrived, I wore red. Not burgundy or wine. No, I wore blood-red silk, slit to the thigh, with a neckline that reminded Alec exactly what he was about to lose. Heads turned. I saw it happen in slow motion. And Alec? His smile froze halfway. He knew. In that moment, he absolutely knew. I walked up to him, kissed his cheek lightly, and handed him the envelope. One simple manila envelope. "You're being served," I said quietly, for his ears only. Happy promotion. Then I turned and walked away, the silence behind me louder than any scream. But that wasn't even the real beginning. The real story started after the envelope. After the whispers. After the world Alec built began to crumble. Because you don't just walk away from a man like Alec Rowe and expect him to let you go. You fight. And I was ready to burn everything down. .. I barely made it back to my car before my hands started to shake. It was adrenaline, fear, liberation, all at once. The silence in the back seat was comforting, like the absence of war. I sat there, staring out at the flickering lights of London, and for the first time in a decade, I felt like I could breathe. Then my phone rang. It was him. I didn't answer. Not yet. Not tonight. Instead, I drove straight to the Notting Hill flat. Small, sun-washed, with bookshelves lining the walls and a balcony that overlooked a quiet cobbled street. It was the opposite of Alec's world, And for once, it felt like mine. I slept deeply that night. Not peacefully, there were nightmares, but deeply. And when I woke up, the sun was cutting through the linen curtains like forgiveness. But forgiveness wasn't coming. Not yet. The next morning, I found myself scrolling through my messages. Friends, co-workers, even Alec's mother. Most were confused. Some were supportive. A few were horrified. And Alec had sent 7 messages. All unread. I clicked on the first. Alec, asterisk, asterisk. Are you out of your effing mind? And just like that, I knew the war had started. I called my lawyer. He picked up on the second ring. Ready? Born ready. ... The next few days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Alec launched a full PR campaign, not in public, but within our mutual circles. He played the wounded husband, claimed I was having a mental breakdown, suggested I'd been unstable for months, even tried to claim I was unfaithful, but I was already 3 steps ahead. I had documented everything. I had emails, photos, GPS logs. I even had a recording of a conversation he had with one of his colleagues, bragging about how he'd never get caught because Callista's too naive to know where to look. That clip would be very useful, especially once the custody battle began. Because yes, there was a child. Not born, not yet, but growing. Quietly. A secret. One I hadn't told Alec, and I wasn't sure if I ever would. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. I stared at the pregnancy test in the drawer for hours before I ever took it. Not because I didn't suspect. I did. My body had been whispering it for weeks. But I think a part of me, after everything, wanted to delay knowing. Knowing would mean deciding. It would mean facing Alec again. Not just as a man I was divorcing, but as the potential father of my child. 3 days after I served him, I finally took the test. One pink line appeared quickly, then a second followed, faint but undeniable. Positive? I didn't cry, not right away. I sat on the edge of my bathtub and stared at the white tile floor until it blurred. Then I let my hand fall to my stomach. It's just us now, I whispered. I didn't know what it would mean. I didn't know what I would do. But I knew this baby would not be another pawn in Alec Rowe's game. And that's when my plan changed. I had originally wanted a clean split, assets divided, no prolonged battles. But now I had a future to protect. My lawyer, Felix, was a good man, meticulous, calm, the kind of person who saw 4 moves ahead and didn't blink. When I told him about the pregnancy, he sat very still. Does Alec know? Not yet. Do you want him to? Eventually, but on my terms, he nodded. We can file an emergency order. Keep him from retaliating until we set protections in place. But Callista, you need to be prepared. If he finds out you're pregnant, he'll come for custody. He'll come for you. Let him try. ... By the next week, Alec had sent flowers. Peonies. My favorite. He knew that. The note was short. Apologetic. No signature. I didn't respond. Then came the late-night calls. 22 over the course of one weekend. Then a voicemail. Like asterisk, asterisk. I don't care what you think you know. Come home. This is ridiculous. We can fix this. It was always we when he wanted something. Always you when he was done. I blocked his number. I knew what he was doing. Love bombing, gaslighting, manipulation. Every tool from the narcissist's playbook. I wasn't falling for it again. And yet, some nights, I'd lie awake and remember how he used to be before the world started worshipping him. When we were students and lived in a shoebox flat, surviving on beans and cheap wine, scribbling our dreams on napkins and windowsills. I missed that version of him. But he was dead. Killed by ambition, power, and the belief that I was disposable. ... A week later, Felix called me with a strange tone in his voice. Callista, Alex filed a petition. What kind? He's trying to freeze the joint account. Claims you moved the funds to hide assets. He's also submitted a claim that you're emotionally unfit. Says you've been erratic and might need psychiatric evaluation. I should have been surprised. I wasn't. I laughed. It came out cold and bitter. Tell him to bring it. Felix paused. There's something else. He's hired Edward Lane. My blood went cold. Edward Lane wasn't just a family lawyer. He was infamous. Known for tearing people apart in court. He was expensive, brutal, and had never lost a high-profile case, so that's how he wants to play it. I'll prepare a response. But we need to talk about strategy. This won't be simple anymore. I nodded. I'll come in first thing tomorrow. But even before the strategy session, I had a card Alec didn't know I was holding. I had Emily, the paralegal, the woman he cheated with. I'd never contacted her before, never had a reason to. Until now. I pulled up her Instagram. It had once been private, but now it was wide open. And the most recent story stopped me cold. A photo of Alec, shirtless, asleep, in what looked like a hotel room. Caption: Asterisk men are trash. But sometimes they're pretty. Asterisk, asterisk. Dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, he was supposed to be at a legal summit in Madrid. 3 weeks ago, he told me he was attending marriage counseling. For me, I screenshotted everything. Then I sent her a message. It was short. I think we should talk. Woman to woman. About Alec. Asterisk. Asterisk. She read it within minutes. And then came the reply. I've been waiting for this. Asterisk. ... We met at a cafe tucked off the main road in Kensington. She was younger than me, maybe 25. Pretty in a polished kind of way. Expensive nails. The subtle glow of someone who's used to dinners paid for by someone else. But she didn't come in with a smirk. She looked tired, nervous, like someone clinging to the edge of a secret. Callista, she said as we sat down. I'm sorry. I didn't know he was married. Not at first. I believed her. Because I had once believed Alec too. He's a professional liar, I said. He told me you were separated. That you had issues. I didn't find out until I saw a Christmas photo your mother posted, some family shot. That's when I started pulling away. And he didn't like that, did he? She shook her head. He threatened to ruin me. Said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I never worked in law again. Typical Alec. Do you have anything concrete? She nodded. Opened her phone. Texts. Screenshots. One recording. In it, Alec's voice was clear. Conter cuss ham is gay. Conter asterisk. She'll never leave me. Callista needs me. Women like her. They don't know how to be alone. Asterisk. Asterisk. I almost laughed. Almost cried. Thank you, I whispered. She reached for my hand. Take him down. ... When I walked into Felix's office the next morning, I handed him a flash drive. What's this? Insurance. He plugged it in. Listened. Read. Watched. Then he looked up and smiled for the first time in days. He's done, I nodded. Not yet, but he will be. Because Alec might have started the war, but I was going to finish it. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. I arrived at the courthouse just before sunrise, the autumn air carrying the scent of damp leaves and anticipation. I'd never imagined I'd feel electric standing on cold stone steps, but there I was, heart pounding, stomach a swirl of dread and determination. The weight of the past weeks settled across my shoulders like an overcoat I couldn't shrug off. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Lawyers in tailored suits bustled past me like an army marching into battle. I smoothed the front of my blazer, navy, no chest pocket, simple gold earrings, and breathed in. This wasn't just a hearing. It was the first volley in what promised to be a protracted war. Felix greeted me with a curt nod. His gray eyes, sharp as a hawk's, flicked toward the entrance. "He's here," he murmured. "Edward Lane." I turned. There he was, Alec, immaculately dressed in charcoal. Across from him, Edward, a man built like a tax judge, broad shoulders, steely posture, fingers tapped against his briefcase. I felt my pulse in my throat. "Ready?" Felix whispered. I swallowed. As I'll ever be. We made our way into the courtroom. Pews of oak benches, the judge's bench raised on a platform, flags standing sentinel. Edward strode down the aisle, past me, eyes forward. Alec followed, offering a nod that froze halfway on his lips. I returned it with a measured calm. Let him see. I wasn't afraid. Court opened. The judge, a woman in her late 50s, silver-streaked hair pulled back, peered down from her perch. "We are here for the preliminary hearing in Roe v. Roe. Ms. Roe, Mr. Roe, counsel, you may proceed." Felix rose. He laid out our position. Emergency order to prevent Alec from accessing joint funds, protecting my pregnancy, and confirming custody stays until full hearing. He referenced the evidence. Bank transfers, audio recording, Emily's statements. He spoke calmly, methodically, each word deliberate. Edward countered. He painted me as unstable, emotionally volatile, citing the sudden withdrawal of funds, the overdose rumors he'd planted. He spoke with practiced disdain, as if talking about a hysterical plaintiff, not a woman defending her unborn child. I forced my jaw to unclench, reminded myself why I was here. Because my baby deserved stability, because I deserved respect. When Edward finished, the bailiff called my name. "Callista Roe, please stand." My legs trembled. I steadied myself. He asked, "Are you aware of the funds transferred from the joint account on June 10th? "Yes." My voice seemed distant, but it didn't quaver. "I transferred the funds to a secure account to protect them." Lane sneered. "On what grounds?" "On the ground that my husband was misusing them, to fund an affair, to compromise our joint assets." I met the judge's eyes. "And to protect my child." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Edward leaned forward. "Speculative at best." Felix dropped the flash drive on the bench, pressed play. Alec's voice filled the room. Boasting. Gaslighting. The judge listened in silence, expression unreadable. "Objection," Lane thundered. "This is hearsay." "Your Honor," Felix shot back. "This recording was obtained legally. No statutory restriction applies. It directly proves intent." The judge glanced at her clerk, who thumbed through notes. After a tense pause, she said, "I will admit the recording for preliminary purposes." She turned to Edward. "Respond." He cursed under his breath, then launched into a diatribe about privacy invasion. But the damage was done. Lane's polished veneer cracked. After 2 hours of arguments, the judge ruled. Emergency order granted. Joint account frozen. Alec barred from contacting me except through counsel. Custody discussions deferred until after the baby's birth. Lane's objections were noted but overruled for now. I felt a wave. Relief, triumph, fear all at once. I still had miles to go. But today, I'd won the first battle. Alex stared at me as we left the courtroom. There was something in his gaze. Shock, anger, maybe a flicker of respect. He mouthed a single word. "Well played." I touched my abdomen. "For us," I whispered. Outside, the sky had brightened. The city buzzed. Vans idling, tourists clicking cameras. I thought of the flat in Notting Hill, the life I was building. A life for me and my child. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this was only the beginning. The war would rage on hearings, negotiations, in whispers and headlines. And I needed to be ready. I closed my eyes and took a breath. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also hope. I was not the same Callista who walked into this courthouse. I was stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever. And I would fight until they both were safe. End of third chapter. The morning sunlight streamed through the Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across my desk. I traced them with my fingertips, as if mapping the path ahead, one of the countless decisions I was forced to make now that my life had become a chessboard. The baby kicked softly, a reminder that this wasn't just about me anymore. Every move, every risk, every moment of dread or triumph would echo into two lives. Felix's voice crackled through the phone. The media's starting to sniff around. We need a statement from you. Controlled, measured. I pressed my palm to my stomach. I'll be ready in an hour. He sighed. They want a human story. They want tears. I closed my eyes. Tears. They'd expected me to be fragile. I would give them strength instead. ... By 9, I was at Kensington Gardens, sneakers on, oversized sunglasses, hiding the fatigue under my eyes. A small camera crew followed, set to capture me in motion, walking, smiling, the strong, expectant mother narrative. I'd written the statement myself. Callista Rowe is grateful for the support of friends and family during this challenging time. She remains committed to protecting her and her child's privacy and well-being. The legal process will continue responsibly, and she appreciates the community's understanding. It was bland, safe, exactly what they asked for, but their clicks and views were the battlefield I could not avoid. The cameraman called, "And cut!" I exhaled, feeling like I'd just swallowed a bucket of sand. Back at the flat, I reviewed the morning's headlines on my tablet. Divorce drama, law power couple splits, a banner photo of Alec and me, both of us forced into polite smiles. Another read, "Is the heiress to her husband's fortune faking pregnancy?" Comments flooded below. Anonymous trolls speculated on my motives, my character, my looks. I shut the tablet. Emily's text came through. "Lunch tomorrow? Need to go over more docs." I typed, "Yes, noon, ... The next hours passed in a blur of calls. Bank, insurer, the midwife's office. Each reminded me that bureaucracy never rested. But by afternoon, the world narrowed to a single thread. Alec had filed for a protective order against me. He claimed I threatened him, that I'd shown up at his office and left threatening messages. It was absurd. But in court, perception is power. Felix paced. "We need proof you weren't there." I nodded. "Uber receipts, my security camera, the cafe receipt." He exhaled. "Good. ... That evening, rain pelted the windows. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, drafting my response. My phone buzzed. A DM from a reporter. "Can I call you? I have more questions." I stared. Was I a source now, or a story? I set the phone aside. I'd fight him in court. I would not spill my soul to tabloids. Instead, I called Emily. "Everything okay?" she asked. I described the restraining order claim. She cursed softly. "He's scared." "Then we'll keep him scared," I said. ... On the day of the hearing, the courthouse steps were slick with rain. I held an umbrella, but the cold seeped into my bones. My gloves were soaked, yet as I climbed those steps, I felt something ignite inside me. Righteous fury. Inside, the courtroom was nearly empty. Just Felix, me, and Lane, striding in like a general surveying a conquered city. Alec was absent. Rumor was he'd stayed away to avoid direct confrontation. The judge called the case. Lane presented the paperwork, signed affidavits claiming harassment. Felix countered with Uber logs, entry swipes from the building, and security footage showing I was home that night. Edward tried to object, but the judge cut him off. "These are proper documents." By noon, the protective order was dismissed, but the judge warned, "This is the last time." Lane's jaw clenched. He shot me a glare. I dared not smile. ... I left the courthouse into a sky that had cleared, clouds drifting away like spectators who'd grown bored. My phone erupted. Messages of support from friends, strangers, even some colleagues. But one text stood apart. .exentail. T**. This isn't over. My heart thudded. Not over. No. It was just beginning. I tapped a reply. Good. That night I sat by the window, the city lights reflecting in my eyes. The baby fluttered. A gentle reminder of why I fought. I poured a cup of chamomile and curled into the couch. The legal documents spread around me. Every line, every clause, every headline was a battlefield. I was tired, bone-weary, but I couldn't stop, because somewhere beyond the papers and the courtrooms was a life I wanted for my child, a life of choice, of love, of safety. I took a deep breath. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and fight again. Dawn broke with a hush over London, the sky a canvas of pale pink and gold. From my window in Notting Hill, I watched the city awaken below. Bus engines idling, shopkeepers drawing up shutters, cyclists wobbling down the street. It was a world that moved without me, and yet I felt every heartbeat of it. The baby stirred within me, a gentle reminder that there was life beyond the legal battles and public scrutiny. I placed a hand on my abdomen, closing my eyes. I could feel small kicks, tiny protests at my restless thoughts. I rose and moved to the kitchen, where the kettle whistled its morning song. Over chamomile tea, I reviewed the timeline Felix had sent: deposition dates, document deadlines, expert witness interviews. The calendar felt like a minefield. A knock at the door startled me. Emily stood there, arms wrapped around a stack of files. Her face was bright but tired, a reflection of the late nights we'd spent preparing her testimony and vetting every piece of evidence. "Morning," she said softly. I brought the finalized transcripts. I took them gratefully. "Thank you. Coffee?" She nodded and stepped inside. We settled at the table, the files laid out like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled. "Your expert's deposition is scheduled for Friday," Emily began. "Dr. Thompson, an OB/GYN, will testify about the risks of stress and courtroom battles on pregnancy. It'll support our motion for protective measures." I nodded, feeling the weight of it all. "What about Alec's financial expert?" "Lane's guy is thorough, but I found discrepancies in his valuation of the marital assets." She tapped the top of the document. "If we challenge it correctly, we can force a reevaluation." I sipped my tea. "Then let's prepare our motion. .. Later that morning, I arrived at the family law chambers for my deposition. The corridor was quiet except for the muted clack of my heels. A secretary directed me to a conference room where a court reporter and Alec's attorney, a slender man with steel-rimmed glasses, waited. Felix stood at my side, steadfast, vigilant. He squeezed my shoulder as I sat. "Ms. Rowe, please state your full name for the record." "Callista Joanna Rowe." The questions began gently. Background, education, marriage date. Then they turned sharper. Finances, the nature of our separation, my relationship with Emily. Each reply required precision. At one point, Alec's attorney leaned forward. "Is it true you had no intention of reconciling? That you planned this divorce for months?" I looked directly at him. "I planned to protect my child and myself." He paused, unsettled by my calm. Felix shot me an approving glance. 2 hours later, the deposition concluded. I stepped back into the daylight, the reality of what I'd just endured settling heavily in my chest. But I'd held my ground. Afternoon light found me in a quiet cafe on Portobello Road. Felix joined me, pulling out a folder. "We have the transcripts," he said, sliding them across. "We'll use them to draft our reply to Lane's motion. But there's another matter. Alec's attorneys are pushing for mediation." Mediation, a drag-on. It meant negotiating face-to-face, exposing myself to Alec again. But the judge might order it. "What's your advice?" I asked. He studied me. "If we can set terms, guardrails for privacy, no direct contact, a mediator you trust, it could speed things up. But it risks emotional flare-ups." I weighed it. The endless cycle of hearings and appeals had drained me. If mediation could secure a fair settlement and shield my child before birth. "Arrange it," I said. He nodded and rose. I'll coordinate with Lane's office. That evening, under a slate-gray sky, I visited the prenatal clinic. The waiting room buzzed with muted conversations and the soft cries of babies waiting with their mothers. I sat alone, the room feeling both foreign and familiar. In the exam room, Dr. Thompson examined me, gentle, professional. His words were measured. Your blood pressure's good, the baby's heartbeat strong. But remember, stress can increase risk. Keep these appointments. I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. Anything else? He asked. I paused. Will everything be okay? He offered a reassuring smile. Focus on rest, support, and joy. That helps as much as anything. I left with a pamphlet on prenatal care, feeling both buoyed and vulnerable. Back at the flat, the rain began to fall, tiny diamonds on the window pane. I gazed at the city below, the world continuing without pause. Then my phone buzzed, a calendar invite titled, Mediation, Roe versus Roe. The date, 2 weeks away. I accepted. This was another battlefield. But I had allies. Felix, Emily, Dr. Thompson, my baby. And I was ready. End of part 5. The morning of mediation arrived with a brittle calm. I stood before the mirror in the Notting Hill Flats bedroom, smoothing my dark green sheath dress. The fabric hugged my curves gently, accommodating my growing belly. My hair was pulled into a low chignon, and my makeup was minimal, just enough to hide the fatigue under my eyes. I took a deep breath and pressed my palm to my stomach. We'll be okay, I whispered to the baby. My reflection offered no reassurance, just determination. Felix was already downstairs, waiting in the lobby of the Mediation Center on Old Bond Street. The building, an elegant Victorian townhouse converted into professional suites, smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. I joined him, and he handed me a file thicker than any I'd carried before. This is the agenda, he said softly. Custody provisions, financial settlement, privacy safeguards. His gray eyes flicked to mine. Remember, we control the narrative. I nodded, heart pounding. The mediation room was a wide oval table, surrounded by high-backed chairs. At one end sat the mediator, a kindly woman named Harriet Gill, whose reputation for neutrality preceded her. Across from us, Alec entered with Edward Lane. He looked smaller, stripped of the courtroom's theatrics, his sharp suit softened by doubt. A silence settled as we all took our seats. Harriet cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming. Our goal today is to reach an agreement that protects both parties and, most importantly, the welfare of the child. Felix handed her a copy of our proposal. Alec's lawyer slid forward a counter, thin, self-serving, and lacking any real concessions. As the mediator guided the discussion through custody terms, I felt the weight of every word. Shared decision-making, supervised visitation, protections against disparagement. Each clause felt like carving out safety in stone. When it was my turn, I spoke with quiet conviction. I propose primary residence with me until our child is at least 2 years old. Visits must be supervised. No public statements or social media posts about our personal lives. Alec bristled. That's excessive. I looked at him evenly. It's reasonable, Edward interjected, but Harriet shushed him with a gentle gesture. She weighed both sides, then turned to me. Ms. Rowe, your concerns about privacy. Do you have evidence of reputational harm? I shared examples. Leaked court documents that Lane had tried to smear in gossip columns. Text messages from paparazzi seeking salacious details. Harriet nodded thoughtfully. Hours passed in negotiation, each moment winding tighter around us. There were occasions when Alec would glance at me, regret or longing in his eyes. I didn't look back. By mid-afternoon, the atmosphere had shifted. Edward leaned toward Lane and whispered. Alec straightened and cleared his throat. All right, he said. I accept primary custody with supervision as described, and the non-disparagement clause. A hush fell. Harriet allowed a small smile. Excellent. Now financial settlement. She handed a document to Felix. We hashed out alimony, asset division, legal fees. Each figure negotiated like a delicate balance. By 5 p.m., we had a signed agreement. The mediator called it a success. Both parties protected, the child's interests paramount. That evening, I returned to the flat shaken, exhilarated, exhausted. Felix stayed late, helping me file the signed documents with the court. When he left, I sank onto the couch, tears slipping free. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "You did it." I typed back, "We did it." The next morning, the sun broke through gray clouds. I walked through Kensington Gardens, the weight on my mind lifted. People nodded, smiled. A mother with a stroller waved as I passed. I touched my bump. I whispered, "We're safe." But the peace was fragile. Across the city, Alec would regroup, and Lane's appeals might follow. The war was not over. It merely shifted to new terrain. Still, I felt something I hadn't known in months. Hope. I lifted my face to the sky. "Thank you," I breathed. Then I sent a message to Felix. "Prepare for future filings. We're not done." I stepped forward into the sunlight, ready for whatever came next. I woke to the gentle chime of rain against the window, the world outside muted and calm. My phone lay on the bedside table, screen glowing with messages, updates from Felix, confirmations from the court clerk, and one from my mother. "Thinking of you, darling. Proud always." I sat up slowly, the baby kicking as if to say, "Good morning, Mom." I smiled despite the weight of the past weeks. Today would be another battlefield. But first, I needed coffee and clarity. The flat, small kitchen filled with the aroma of freshly ground beans. As I waited for the coffee to brew, I reviewed my notes. Lane's notice of appeal was due next week. The court had scheduled a preliminary review of our mediation agreement the week after. The timeline stretched out, a gauntlet I'd pledged to run. My phone buzzed. It was Emily. Urgent. Emily. Asterisk. "We need to talk. Bring everything to the cafe at noon." I typed back. "On my way. .. By midday, I was at our usual spot on Portobello Road. Emily arrived, eyes bright but urgent. "I spoke to someone at the firm," she began. "They're trying to challenge the non-disparagement clause. They claim it's too restrictive on Alec's free speech." I frowned. "On what grounds?" "Public figure exception. Lane's arguing that because Alec is a public figure, he has the right to speak about the case." I took a deep breath. We anticipated this. He'll push until something breaks. She slid a folder across. "We'll need more evidence of harm. Emails, letters, tweets." I nodded. "I have a few from the tabloids. I'll send them over. .. The afternoon passed in a blur. I compiled screenshots of salacious headlines, notes on comments from freelance bloggers, calling me gold digger and fame seeker. I sent everything to Felix with a note. Strengthen clause defense. By late afternoon, I decided on fresh air and took the baby for a stroll through Holland Park. The trees arched above, leaves rustling. A sense of peace settled over me, fleeting but precious. I paused by the Japanese garden pond, watching koi glide beneath lily pads. My phone buzzed. A text from Felix. "Draft prepared. Tomorrow morning, file our opposition to the appeal." I exhaled, watching ripples spread across the water. Fight and flight. That evening, I found myself drawn to my desk, a reclaimed oak writing table where I once penned short stories. I hadn't touched it in years, but now, something called me back to it. I cleared a space, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank document titled Chapter 6. That was wrong, I thought. It wasn't the 6th chapter, it was our life. I started typing. The thing about life is that the hardest storms yield the strongest trees. We bend, we break, but we also grow. Words flowed, raw, honest, unfiltered. I wrote about fear, the cold dread before each hearing, about anger, the fire that drove me to protect my child, about hope, the sunrise after every battle. I wrote until my eyes burned, until the baby's kicks reminded me to rest, I saved the draft and closed the laptop, feeling more myself than I had in months. The next morning, a crisp, sunlit dawn welcomed me. I arrived at the court clerk's office, documents in hand. The clerk stamped our opposition filing. Received. Received. I stepped outside, breathing deeply. The city hummed around me, buses roaring, shutters clanging. But inside, I felt a stillness. A voice called my name. I turned to see Harriet Gill, the mediator from our session. She smiled warmly. "Ms. Rowe, I thought I'd see how you're doing." Surprised, I nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Gill. It's been intense." She tilted her head. "You conducted yourself with grace. Whatever happens, remember that." Her words were a balm. Unexpected kindness in a war of wills. That evening, I returned home to find a package on my doorstep. Inside, a carved silver locket from my mother, engraved with our family crest and an inscription. Strength and light. I held it to my heart. Strength, I thought. Light. Two things I needed to carry me through the next chapters. I clipped it to my blouse, then sent Felix a brief text. "Thank you for everything." He replied, "Always." I closed my eyes, placing a hand on my baby bump. "We have this," I whispered. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the battles waged in boardrooms and courtrooms. But inside me, a different world was unfolding. One of resilience, of a mother forging a path for her child. And that story, our story, was only just beginning. The dawn light filtered through the lace curtains as I stood in the hallway, lacing up my comfortable flats. Today's mission: deposit the settlement check into the trust account and pick up the nursery furniture from the upholsterer. Mundane tasks, but necessary markers of progress in a life remade. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Trust fund deposit, 10 a.m. I grabbed my coat and stepped into the cool air of Notting Hill. Even the street looked different now. Clean, intentional, as though the world recognized my new footing. At the bank, the teller gave me a sympathetic smile and handed back my deposit slip stamped, "Accepted." I exhaled, imagining the funds settling into a protected account for the baby's future. Every pound felt like a brick building a fortress of security. Next, I walked to the upholsterer's workshop on Portobello Road. The craftsman, a kindly older man named Raj, met me at the door with a flourish. "Madam Rowe, the crib is ready." He led me to a showroom where a classic white crib stood, its curves softened by hand-carved filigree and plush, pale gray bumpers. I ran a finger along the wood, a promise of safety and comfort. Raj demonstrated how the mattress adjusted heights. For the newborn stage, higher; as they grow, lower. His attention to detail mirrored my own meticulous planning. I paid him, securing a delivery date 2 weeks away. As I left, I cradled the memory of that crib against my chest, a symbol of hope beyond legal documents and courtroom victories. The afternoon brought a meeting with my therapist, Dr. Clark. I'd started sessions after the hearing, an essential tether to sanity. I settled into the plush armchair as she offered tea. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, voice warm. I hesitated. Stronger, but exhausted. I thought winning would bring relief. Instead, it's another kind of weight. She nodded. Post-victory exhaustion is real. You've been in survival mode. Now you're transitioning to rebuilding. That can feel unsettling. I closed my eyes. I'm afraid if I pause, even for a moment, everything could fall apart. She leaned forward. Pause is part of the process. Rest isn't weakness. It's preparation. Your baby needs a calm mother. Tears welled. I exhaled. I'm trying. That evening, I returned to the flat and found Emily waiting on the couch. She rose with a sympathetic look. "The appeal hearing is set for next month," she said, voice low. I nodded, settling beside her. "We knew it was coming." She placed a folder in my lap. I reviewed Lane's brief. They're arguing procedural grounds, claiming the mediation agreement was flawed because Alec didn't have independent counsel. My stomach twisted. But he did. He was represented by Lane himself. She nodded. Exactly. We can show he knowingly signed, but it'll take expert affidavits. I touched my bump. Then we'll get them. ... Under the lamp's warm glow, I drafted emails to 2 family law experts requesting affidavits confirming the validity of mediated agreements when both parties are represented. My fingers hovered over the send button. This was another layer of preparation. A scaffolding around my child's future. I pressed send, then sank into the couch. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock. Simple comforts in a complicated life. I typed a quick message to Felix. Asterisk, initiating expert outreach. Will forward responses. Asterisk, asterisk. He replied immediately. Asterisk. Thank you. Keep resting. I've got this. Asterisk, asterisk, ... Later that night, I paced by the window, watching street lamps flicker. My reflection merged with the city lights. A woman whose life had been shattered and reshaped beyond recognition. Alex's last message echoed. This isn't over. But I'd grown too strong for empty threats. I whispered to the darkness, No, it's not over. But I'm ready. Above me, the stars blinked in silent solidarity. The road ahead remained long. Appeals, possible trial, endless negotiations. Yet in that moment, I felt an unshakable truth. I would walk it for my child. And with every step, I reclaimed a fragment of the life I deserved. End of Part 8. The Saturday market at Covent Garden bustled with weekend energy. Stalls of fresh flowers, artisan cheeses, handmade crafts. I navigated through the crowd, the baby's gentle kicks echoing the pulse of the city. For a moment, I let myself be a spectator, not a litigant. My phone buzzed. A message from Felix, succinct as ever. Thomas Lane's appeal hearing brief has been filed. They'll assign a hearing date soon. I slipped into a quiet cafe tucked behind a bookshop. The scent of espresso mingled with old paper. As I sat, I felt the weight of every upcoming floor of this building I was constructing. Court dates, expert reports, custody reviews. But today, a Saturday, I granted myself permission to pause. I ordered tea and a scone, savoring each crumb, ... Later, I met with Maria, the doula I'd hired for childbirth classes. She led me through breathing techniques and positions for labor support. Remember, she said gently, your body knows this. Your mind needs guidance. I watched her demonstrate a hip-swaying stance. This will help the baby descend. I stood, mimicking her movements. My belly swayed with the motion, and I closed my eyes, feeling the baby respond. When class ended, she hugged me. You're prepared, Callista. Trust yourself. Her confidence bolstered mine. ... That evening, I returned to the flat to find a thick envelope on the table. It was from the court clerk. The hearing date. October 15th. I exhaled. Less than 3 months away. I sat at my writing desk, flipping the calendar to October. Each day filled with notes, therapy sessions, midwife visits, deposition prep. I penciled in expert witness prep, the week before the hearing. Then I stared at the empty margin beside the date. My phone chimed. A voicemail from Emily. I listened in the dim light. Emily, **Cal. Edward Lane called me today. He wants to schedule a pre-hearing settlement conference. He says he's open to dropping the appeal if we agree to reduce the non-disparagement time from 10 years to 5. I told him I'd get back to you. I paused. A potential concession. Reducing protection for our child's privacy, but avoiding another hearing. I tapped a reply. Let's discuss tomorrow. ... Sleep came fitfully. I dreamed of courtrooms filled with whispering shadows, faces I couldn't recognize. I woke with a start, heart racing. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I drafted a message to Emily. Reject. Stick to our agreement. Privacy isn't negotiable. She responded. Understood. ... At breakfast, I sipped tea and stared at the autumn leaves swirling outside. This war had changed me. I no longer feared conflict. I embraced it when it meant protecting my child. I packed my bag for the day. Documents for midwife appointment, filings for Felix. On my way out, I paused by the crib sample in the corner. Its pristine white bars gleamed. I pressed my palm to the wood. I whispered, "For you, always." Then I walked into the day, ready for whatever came next. I woke early, before dawn, the flat silent except for the soft hum of the radiator. My phone lay on the bedside table beside a list of today's tasks: midwife appointment, file expert affidavits, prenatal yoga class. But the top item glowed with urgency. 5*, review Lane's settlement conference proposal, ****. I slipped into a robe and padded to the window. The street was empty, lamplights casting long shadows. For a moment I closed my eyes and pressed a hand to my belly. The baby stirred, a flutter of reassurance. I brewed tea and sat at my writing desk, the settlement paperwork spread before me. Lane's proposal: reduce the non-disparagement clause to 5 years, adjust alimony by 10%, and maintain the privacy safeguards only during the child's first year. A tempting shortcut to avoid another hearing, but at what cost? My heart pounded. 5 years felt endless when it came to protecting my child's future. 1 year was bare minimum. 10 years was needed to guard against future slander. I transmitted a message to Felix: reject conference terms, privacy clause non-negotiable. He replied within minutes. Understood. I'll draft our counter ... By mid-morning, I was at the prenatal clinic. The waiting room was bright, with sun and the soft murmur of expectant mothers. I clutched my folder: expert affidavit drafts, financial statements, Emily's testimony notes. The midwife called me in. We discussed my blood pressure, the baby's growth, iron levels. All good news. Then she smiled kindly. "How are you handling stress?" I held her gaze. "It's a fight, but I'm managing." She nodded. "Remember, self-care is as important as legal care." I promised myself to book a prenatal massage. ... Afternoon brought a flurry of emails. Lane's office had set a deadline for our counterproposal: 48 hours. Felix and I reviewed strategy: maintain current terms, offer a slight financial concession if necessary, but never touch the 10-year privacy guard. I drafted the counter: same non-disparagement for 10 years, slight reduction in spousal support to remove financial leverage for him to revisit terms, and language-tightening confidentiality on all mediated discussions. I emailed it to Felix for final review and approval. That evening, I attended prenatal yoga in a studio overlooking a quiet courtyard. The group moved through stretches, cat-cow, warrior poses, each breath steadying my mind. The instructor's voice guided us back to the present. As I rested in child's pose, I felt the baby shift, as if responding to the calm. I closed my eyes, feeling gratitude for this small sanctuary. Back home, I discovered Felix's reply: counter is solid. Lane has 2 days to respond. I exhaled. On the desk lay my journal, open to the blank page of Part 10. But our lives weren't chapters I could title yet. They were days to be lived, battles to be fought. I wrote a line anyway. Every dawn is a choice. Continue the war or choose peace. But some wars are worth continuing. I closed the journal and whispered to my belly, "We're together in this." Outside, the city lights blinked, the future unknown but ours to shape. The first frost of October arrived overnight, coating Notting Hill's cobblestone streets in a delicate lace of ice. I zipped my coat higher as I left the flat, the morning air sharp enough to chase away the remnants of sleep. My breath formed little clouds as I hurried to the courthouse for what would be the first status conference on Lane's appeal. Felix and I arrived early, the marble steps gleaming beneath a pale sun. He carried a slim folder, the appeal brief we'd filed, along with supporting affidavits from the 2 family law experts. As we waited, I ran through the timeline in my mind: hearing date October 15th, mediation terms in place, expert outreach complete. The precarious balance trembled on a single hinge. Alec appeared next, hands shoved into his coat pockets, eyes hidden by sunglasses despite the indoor light. He glanced at me before turning his attention to Edward Lane, who was drumming his fingers on the bench. "Callista," Felix murmured, offering a reassuring nod. "They'll see reason." I nodded, though my heart thudded. The courtroom clerk called us in, and we took our seats before the judge. A new face, Judge Hamilton, with kind but perceptive eyes. "Roe versus Roe, appeal of mediated agreement," she began. "Counsel for appellant?" Lane rose. "Your Honor, we contend the non-disparagement clause is unenforceable beyond 1 year, and that Alec's rights as a public figure warrant broader speech." He spoke confidently, citing case law and constitutional principles. The judge listened, fingers steepled. When Lane finished, Felix stood. He presented our counter-argument. Alec had knowingly signed the clause. The harm to reputation was documented. The clause was part of a broader agreement protecting a minor's privacy, an interest the courts regularly uphold. He quoted family law statutes and prior rulings that validated extended non-disparagement clauses in custody-mediated agreements. Judge Hamilton leaned forward. "Ms. Roe, would you care to speak?" she invited. I rose, steadier than I felt. "Your Honor, when we mediate an agreement concerning a child's well-being, we carve out protections that endure. The public hears and remembers. Without a decade's safeguard, Alec could, and likely would, reopen this wound, endangering our child's future." Silence followed. Alec's jaw tightened. The judge took a moment, then said, "I'm inclined to uphold the clause as written. However, I will review the specific language in detail. I expect a further written submission on why 10 years is necessary. Let's reconvene on October 25th for a final ruling." Relief and relief washed through me. A delay, yes, but also a sign the clause would stand. Outside, Felix closed his notebook. "One step closer." I exhaled. "One step. .. Later that day, I found myself at South Kensington Gardens, the late autumn sun low and golden. I sank onto a bench, the breeze rustling the leaves. My fingers traced the lines of my leather gloves as I let my gaze drift to families strolling by. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Emily, asterisk, your expert affidavits were impressive." Lane's counsel looked rattled. I smiled, replying, "Thank you. Couldn't have done it without you, .. That evening, in the warmth of the flat, I prepared a small dinner, roasted vegetables and quinoa, to nourish us. I set the table by the window, candles flickering. The delivery for the crib would arrive tomorrow, and the nursery was taking shape in the spare room. Soft gray walls, hand-painted stars, and a plush changing table. I ran my fingers along the crib rail sample still in the corner and whispered, "Almost ready, little one." My phone chimed. "Felix, drafting submission on 10-year necessity. I'll have it to you tonight." I leaned back, the weight of the day settling gently. The war for my child's future stretched ahead, but today's victory kindled hope. I closed my eyes, resting my palm on my belly. "Sleep well," I whispered. "Tomorrow, we build again." The wind shifted overnight, bringing a sharp chill that froze the breath of autumn across London's streets. I stood at the window of my Notting Hill flat, watching the world below awaken under a steely sky. The nursery lay quiet behind me, the crib now assembled, draped in soft linens and stocked with blankets. Each detail felt sacred, a testament to a life built from the ashes of my old one. My phone's alarm buzzed, 6 a.m., reminding me of the day's first task. I slipped into my gray cashmere sweater, smoothing its soft fibers over my arms. Below, my bump pressed gently against the waistband of my jeans, a living promise of the future. Felix's calendar popped up, court submission review at 9:30, midwife at 11 o'clock, meeting with expert at 2 o'clock. The day unfurled before me, a tapestry of milestones and battles. I poured coffee, strong and black, and opened my laptop. The draft for the written submission on the non-disparagement clause sat waiting, 3,000 words outlining legal precedent, psychological harm studies, comparative case analyses. I read each line, ensuring the tone struck the delicate balance between advocacy and respect for the court's process. At 8:45, I called Felix. He offered quiet encouragement. "We'll submit this before lunch. Then you can focus on your appointment." I exhaled. "Thank you. ... The Family Division Court at the Strand was imposing in the morning gloom. Marble pillars framed heavy wooden doors. I checked my reflection in the glass, a woman resolute despite the tremor in her heart. Felix accompanied me inside. We met with the registrar, who accepted our submission with a nod. "Judge Hamilton will review and schedule a decision conference," she said. As we left, I realized how much energy these legal routines consumed. Anticipation, dread, relief, rinse, repeat, ... My midwife appointment was at St. Mary's. The corridors smelled of antiseptic and orchids. Nurse Patel greeted me, led me to the soft-lit exam room, and took my vitals. All was well. Heart rate strong, growth on track. She paused, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You're doing wonderfully, Callista. Have you been sleeping?" "Not enough," I admitted. She pressed a packet into my hand. "Guided meditation recordings for pregnancy. Try these. They help. ... By early afternoon, I met Dr. Evelyn Stewart, the legal scholar and family law expert who would sign our affidavit. She was housed in a glass-walled office at King's College, surrounded by towering bookshelves. "Ms. Rowe," she said, offering tea, "I've reviewed your materials. The clause is defensible, but we'll need to emphasize the unique vulnerability of children born into high-profile disputes." I nodded, absorbing every word as if it were oxygen. She tapped her pen. "I'll finalize the affidavit tonight and send it to your counsel." Relief warmed me. One more fortress brick in place. ... Returning home, dusk had settled. The nursery was lit by a single lamp, casting shadows that danced across the mobile above the crib. I crossed the threshold and rested a hand on the mattress. The silence held a sacred weight. This space, safe, quiet, would soon welcome a new soul. My phone buzzed. Felix's message. * Dr. Stewart's affidavit received. Submitting to court tonight. I exhaled. A deep release of breath I didn't know I'd been holding. ... Later, I sank onto the couch with a mug of chamomile tea. I opened my journal to a fresh page, pen poised. I wrote. Today, every ounce of preparation met its match in reality, and we stood firm. The world outside is tempestuous, but in the quiet of these walls I find purpose. Tomorrow, the court will speak. But tonight, I rest in the certainty that I have done everything I can to keep us both safe. I closed the journal, placing it beside the crib sample. A solitary tear slid down my cheek. Grief for what was lost, gratitude for what was gained. I whispered into the dim room. "Sleep well, love. We are ready for whatever comes." A thin veil of mist hovered over the Thames as I stepped off the tube at Westminster, the chill of early November biting through my coat. Today marked the start of expert witness depositions, a critical phase in the appeal, and one I could not afford to falter. My footsteps echoed in the marble foyer of the law offices, where Dr. Stewart awaited to testify on the enforceability of our non-disparagement clause. Felix walked beside me, his presence a steady anchor. He carried 2 bulging briefcases brimming with exhibits and cross-notes. "Ready?" he asked, voice low. I inhaled, tasting the cold air. "Born ready. ... In the sleek glass conference room, Dr. Stewart sat at the head of the table, flanked by her paralegal. Across from her, Lane's counsel, Mr. Beckford, arranged his papers with meticulous precision. Edward Lane hovered at the doorway, watching with keen interest. The court reporter signaled the start. Beckford began with baseline questions: credentials, publications, courtroom experience. Dr. Stewart responded with quiet authority, each answer reinforcing her expertise. Then came the crux. "Dr. Stewart, in your professional opinion, does a 10-year non-disparagement clause protect a minor's privacy and emotional welfare?" Beckford's tone was civil but probing. She met his gaze. "Yes. In high-profile disputes, reputational harm can extend well beyond infancy." A decade-long clause aligns with developmental milestones, early childhood through pre-adolescence, when a child's sense of self can be irrevocably shaped by public narratives about their parents. Her words hung in the sterile air. I exhaled internally. This testimony would be pivotal, ... After 2 hours, the deposition concluded. Beckford attempted to undermine her testimony, cross-examining citations and methodologies. Dr. Stewart remained unflappable, citing empirical studies and legal precedents that left her detractor grasping at semantics. When it ended, Felix closed his notebook. That went very well. He offered me a relieved smile. I nodded, though my shoulders still ached from tension. ... Outside, the sky was pale as paper. I took a moment on the steps to compose myself. The world felt both expansive and constricting. London's bustle continuing as though nothing of consequence had happened inside. My phone buzzed. "Emily, your mother called. She's flying in tomorrow." I smiled. Family solidarity was another fortress wall. ... Back home, I found a care package on the doorstep. A hamper from my mother, filled with herbal teas, cozy socks, and a hand-knitted blanket. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders and curled into the couch, the baby kicking gently. I opened my laptop to review the transcript of Dr. Stewart's deposition. Felix's email awaited. "Schedule your prenatal massage tomorrow morning. Keep taking care of you." I booked the appointment, then drafted a quick message to my mother. "Looking forward to seeing you. We could use a day of normalcy. ... That evening, I wrote in my journal by lamplight. Today, knowledge became my shield. Our child's future hinges not just on statutes, but on understanding, on the compassion of those who shape the law. Each expert grows the bulwark of protection around us. And though the war continues, I carry hope in every heartbeat within me." I closed the journal, a sense of calm settling. Tomorrow, normalcy might arrive in the form of a mother's embrace, but tonight, I rested in the confidence that every deposit, every affidavit, every negotiation was building a legacy of safety and dignity. I whispered to the darkness, "We are ready for you." November deepened, and London's days grew shorter, fog rolling off the Thames like whispered secrets. I woke one morning to find frost lining the balconies of Notting Hill, each crystal a testament to winter's approach. The chill in the air seemed fitting. The next legal skirmish loomed. Felix's email awaited. Judge Hamilton has scheduled the ruling conference for November 25th. We should discuss strategy. I read it with the kettle's whistle echoing behind me. Settling at the oak desk, I reviewed the proposed agenda, finalize arguments on the non-disparagement clause, outline possible remedies if overturned, and prepare for disputed financial adjustments. The weight settled in my chest, but I straightened in my chair, pressing my palm to my belly. "We've come so far," I whispered. "We will finish this. ... That afternoon, armed with files and determination, I joined Felix at his chambers. The office overlooking Victoria Embankment was warm, leather-bound volumes lining shelves, the scent of old paper and coffee in the air. We spoke in hushed urgency. "Our opponents may push to invalidate the clause entirely," Felix warned. "We need a fallback plan, stipulate an alternative public apology framework rather than full repeal." I considered. The thought of Alec making any statement publicly about me or our child felt like slashing open old wounds. But a private apology sealed in court, no press allowed, might contain the damage. "Draft it," I said. "We negotiate that if we must." He nodded, tapping his pen. "I'll have it by tomorrow. ... Evening found me at a prenatal Pilates class, stretching away tension. The instructor's calm voice guided us through exercises designed for core strength and pelvic stability. As I settled into a supported bridge pose, I felt the baby shift, a gentle kick, as if in solidarity. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. When class ended, I lingered by the studio window, watching pedestrians hurry beneath gray skies. Life continued beyond courtrooms. Families walking dogs, couples sharing umbrellas. I envied their simplicity. ... Later that night, I returned to the desk to review draft language. Felix had created an alternative clause. In the event the non-disparagement provision is deemed unenforceable, both parties agree to a private, sealed apology to be filed with the court and shared only between counsel. I read it carefully. It wasn't ideal, but it offered a buffer. "This will do," I messaged, and then I added, "Let's push for full clause retention, but keep this ready." 2 days later, the judges' chambers at the Strand felt more ominous. The preliminary conference convened, and we presented our final positions. Lane's counsel argued the clause stifled free speech. Felix countered with detailed harm analysis and surrogate affidavit excerpts. He then presented our fallback apology framework. Judge Hamilton listened intently, occasionally jotting notes. When it ended, she dismissed both sides to await her written ruling in a week. As we left, Felix paused on the steps. "That was our strongest showing yet," I exhaled. "Now we wait. Night settled over the flat as I prepared curry and rice, the familiar aroma comforting. While the ingredients simmered, I sketched nursery plans, new paint colors, shelving arrangements, a reading nook. Planning the space gave my mind a reprieve from legal strategizing. Later, curled under a fleece blanket with a cup of chamomile, I called my mother. Hearing her voice, soft, unwavering, restored something in me I feared lost. "Every day you amaze me," she said. "Your strength will guide you and your child." I smiled into the phone. "Thank you, Mum. I needed that. The following dawn, I discovered Judge Hamilton's email, ruling forthcoming within 48 hours. My breath caught. The days ahead would determine the protections around my child's early years. I dressed in layers, cashmere and wool, preparing for whatever news arrived. But before the courthouse doors swung open, I allowed myself one final act of nurturing. I wrapped the knitted blanket from my mother around my shoulders, touching the soft yarn to my cheek. I whispered, "Whatever happens, I've done everything to keep you safe." Outside, London stirred, buses rumbling, shopkeepers unfolding awnings. The world moved forward, and so would we. The week leading up to November 25th unfolded in a blur of anticipation and weary preparation. Each morning, I awoke before dawn, the flat silent except for the soft hum of the radiator. I dressed in layers to ward off the chill that crept through Notting Hill's windowsills, then settled at the oak writing desk to review and refine my notes. With the nursery nearly complete, paw-print curtains hung, a basket of hand-knit booties by the crib, I found solace in small, tactile tasks, folding swaddles, arranging picture books in a neat row. Yet beneath the daily routines, my mind churned with legal strategy. How to emphasize the academic and psychological research supporting the non-disparagement clause. How to respond if the judge proposed further modifications. Felix's messages punctuated my days. Asterisk draft of oral arguments attached. Asterisk mock hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m. Asterisk remember to rest, Callista. You need your strength. Asterisk. I replied with gratitude, though I knew true rest was slipping through my fingers like sand. The mock hearing was held in Felix's office, his paralegal playing the role of Judge Hamilton. I stood before them and delivered the oral argument I would present at the real conference. "Your Honor," I began, voice steady, "the 10-year non-disparagement clause before this court is both necessary and reasonable. In cases involving public figures, media scrutiny can revive past disputes years later, long after the child has formed their identity. Our purpose here is to ensure that our child, born into a high-profile divorce, is not subjected to a lifetime of public commentary that could harm their emotional development." Felix's paralegal interrupted with a question mirroring Lane's anticipated challenge. Would a 5-year clause not suffice, considering most children start formal education around age 5? I paused, then replied, "Developmental psychology indicates that stress and public stigma during early adolescence, a period spanning ages 10 to 12, can have lasting impacts on self-esteem and social integration. A decade clause coincides with that critical window, protecting the child through preteen years." The mock judge nodded approvingly. "Very persuasive." I exhaled, though I knew the real judge might prove tougher. On the eve of November 25th, London streets sparkled with festive lights, vendors selling roasted chestnuts and hot cocoa. I resisted the temptation to distract myself with holiday cheer. Instead, I retreated to the couch, blanket around my shoulders, journal in hand. I wrote, "Tomorrow, the final obstacle stands before us. It is not merely a ruling on paper, it is a verdict on the future I fight to build." I tremble with anticipation, but I also hold a fierce hope that the law will recognize our need for shelter from the storm. My hand trembled as I signed the page. I rose, stretching, and placed the journal beside the lamp. The house was still, awaiting dawn. The morning of the conference, frost glazed the pavement. I dressed carefully, navy dress, pearl earrings, simple gold pendant. I applied makeup sparingly, hiding fatigue but not erasing the traces of the battle-weary nights. Felix drove me to the Strand in silence, the city rising around us. At the court, I took a moment on the steps to breathe. The cold air filled my lungs, fortifying me. Inside Judge Hamilton's chamber, we presented our final arguments. Lane's counsel emphasized free speech. Felix highlighted the documented harms. I closed with a personal appeal. "Your Honor, I stand here not only as a petitioner, but as a mother. My fight is to grant my child the right to a childhood unmarred by public shaming and sensational headlines. This clause is not an attack on anyone's voice, but a shield for a life yet to be lived." Silence enveloped the room. Then the judge spoke. "The court recognizes the unique vulnerability of the child in this matter. The 10-year non-disparagement clause is upheld as written. The agreement stands." A wave of relief washed over me. I exhaled, tears pricking my eyes. Outside, Felix hugged me. Alex stood at a distance, his face unreadable before slipping away. We walked in the cold air, the city buzzing around us. I clutched Felix's arm. "It's done." He smiled. "It's done." That evening, the flat glowed in soft lamplight. I lit a candle in the nursery and placed the hand-knitted blanket in the crib. I whispered to the empty room, "Your world is safe." I sank onto the couch, exhaustion and triumph mingling. I opened my journal. Today, the law protected our future. I fought not for vengeance, but for tranquility in the years ahead. My child will grow shielded from the storms of scandal. This is the victory I earned. I closed the journal and touched the pendant at my throat. Outside, the winter wind whispered, but within these walls, we had found peace. End of part 15. The late November sun dipped low, casting long shadows across Notting Hill's cobblestones. I woke before dawn, the quiet of the flat interrupted only by the soft ticking of the antique clock in the hallway. Today marked a personal milestone beyond the court's realm, a maternity photo session to capture the life growing within me. It should have been a moment of pure joy, a celebration of motherhood, but my mind, still bound by ongoing legal skirmishes, refused to let me wholly exhale. After a steaming cup of coffee, I slipped into my favorite wrap dress, emerald green silk that draped over my bump, and applied a touch of lipstick. The color felt invigorating, a small rebellion against the fatigue etched around my eyes. I paused, placing a hand on my belly. "Ready?" I whispered. The baby shifted as if answering. The photographer's studio was a bright loft near Camden Passage, its white walls and wooden floors softened by softboxes and reflectors. I stood in front of a large window, the early light a halo behind me. The photographer, Lena, guided me through gentle poses. Hand on heart, profile silhouette, both hands cradling my belly. Each click of the shutter felt like a heartbeat, capturing vulnerability anchored by resilience. I opened my eyes, meeting Lena's encouraging smile. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel beautiful, hopeful, and at peace, but as I left the studio clutching a cup of hot chocolate, my phone buzzed. A message from Felix. Judge Hamilton's written ruling on the acknowledgement process is available. We need to review. I exhaled. The battle resumed even as life unfolded. Back at the flat, I laid out the photos Lena had sent. Soft focus portraits bathed in golden light. I traced the curves of my silhouette, each image a promise that joy existed alongside struggle. Then I opened my laptop and navigated to the court's portal. There it was, the procedural ruling on the mediation agreement's acknowledgement process. The judge had approved our alternative apology framework as a failsafe, a victory we'd built but hoped never to deploy. Felix's email summarized, alternative framework accepted. Confirmation of complete agreement depends on filing a consolidated order by next week. We should prepare the draft definitively. I typed back, let's finalize it today. The afternoon found me at my writing desk, drafting the consolidated order. Each clause mirrored the language we negotiated: primary custody, non-disparagement, financial terms, confidentiality provisions. I labored over every word, aware that clarity here would seal our child's sanctuary. By evening, I sent the draft to Felix for his review. Then I allowed myself to cook a simple dinner: grilled fish, roasted vegetables, savoring each bite as nourishment for two. Later, I took a moment in the nursery. The crib now stood beneath a mobile of paper cranes. The changing table was dressed in neatly folded diapers and baby lotions. I ran my finger across the painted wall where hand-cut stencils of stars formed a constellation overhead. I pressed my palm to the crib rail and closed my eyes. "This is for you," I murmured. In the silence, my mind flickered to the coming months. Appeals still possible but constrained. Financial matters largely settled. The most important fortress walls razed. And beyond the law, a new world awaited. Diapers, midnight feedings, first smiles, greater than the transition from courtrooms to motherhood would demand new strengths. But I felt ready. I slipped away quietly, the crib's soft mattress awaiting its occupant. My legacy, my purpose, my hope. The calendar flipped to December, and Christmas lights began to twinkle along the streets of Notting Hill. Despite the festive cheer, my world remained tethered to the looming arrival of our child and the final settlement paperwork that needed filing before the holidays. I woke early, the flat still enfolded in gray dawn, and felt an unexpected flutter of excitement mingled with lingering fatigue. I dressed in comfortable layers: wool skirt, cashmere sweater, and a scarf knitted by my mother. My bump was more pronounced now, shifting my center of gravity and making the simplest tasks feel monumental. Yet each movement felt purposeful, a step toward the life waiting beyond the courtroom. In the kitchen, I brewed peppermint tea and opened my laptop. The consolidated order, combining mediation agreement, expert affidavits, and Judge Hamilton's confirmations, awaited final signatures. I carefully reviewed the text, ensuring every clause reflected our negotiations: primary custody, the 10-year non-disparagement provision, confidentiality safeguards, financial terms, and the alternative apology framework. Felix had sent a draft with track changes. I accepted his edits and added a cover letter to the court, summarizing the agreement's compliance with statutory requirements. Then, with a steady hand, I signed the last page. By mid-morning, I met Felix at the Family Division Clerk's office. The clerk accepted our documents, stamping them ***, filed December 10, 2025. I exhaled, relief flooding through me. The long war was finally at an end. "Congratulations," Felix said, shaking my hand. "Enjoy the rest of the season." I replied, voice soft. "Thank you, for everything." Walking home, I felt lighter than I had in months. The streets bustled with holiday shoppers, children pressing faces against toy store windows, couples strolling hand in hand. I paused at a florist where red poinsettias glowed in crates. I bought a small potted plant and carried it to my flat. Inside, I placed it on the mantel, a bright dash of color against the neutral walls. That afternoon, my mother arrived, suitcase in hand and a warm smile on her face. She wrapped me in a tight hug, her presence a balm to my frayed nerves. "I've missed you," she said. I leaned into her. I've missed you too. We spent the day baking gingerbread cookies, the kitchen filled with flour, laughter, and the scent of spices. My mother guided my hands as I rolled dough into hearts and stars. For every perfect shape, there were 3 that flopped, yet she applauded each one with delight. By evening, we sat by the fireplace with mugs of hot cocoa and a plate of imperfect but delicious cookies. Tonight, my mother said, we celebrate you and the new life you're bringing into this world. I smiled, feeling the joy I hadn't allowed myself to feel in so long. Later, alone in the nursery, I gazed at the crib, now crowned, with a garland of fairy lights. The painted stars on the walls seemed to glow in welcome. I placed my hand on my belly. We did it, I whispered to the baby. We're safe now. Outside, the muffled sounds of the city prepared for Christmas Day drifted through the window. Inside, I felt a peace I hadn't known since before the life I built with Alec had begun to unravel. I closed my eyes, imagining the gentle rise and fall of the baby in the womb, the world waiting just beyond the glass. Hope, at last, felt possible. And in that quiet moment, I believed it would last. The winter solstice approached, and London's nights lengthened, draping the city in early darkness and sparkling streetlights. I awoke before sunrise on December 20th, the low winter sun not yet risen. Slipping from bed, I felt a familiar stir of anticipation and anxiety as I pressed my hand to my abdomen. In 5 weeks, our child would arrive, and with that birth, a new chapter beyond legal triumphs and courtroom battles. But first, there was one more hurdle. The Consolidated Order's final sealing by the Family Division, scheduled for December 22nd. The court's blessing would render our mediated settlement unassailable. I had drafted the final paperwork, but procedural formalities still loomed. I dressed in a charcoal gray cashmere sweater and soft black leggings, practical warmth for a day of errands and court visits. Over coffee, I reviewed Felix's latest email. The court clerk requires 2 signed originals and a witness attestation. We meet at 10 a.m. I exhaled, steeling myself for the day ahead. The crisp December air bit at my cheeks as I made my way to Felix's chambers in Westminster. He greeted me at the door, briefcases in hand. Together, we walked to the court's filing window, where the clerk accepted our documents with a polite nod and stamped each page. Nimes *, sealed December 22nd, 2025. ***. Relief washed over me. I clutched the sealed order to my chest like a lifeline. Outside the court, the square was decorated with a giant Christmas tree, lights twinkling against the pale sky. For a moment, the world felt celebratory. Felix allowed himself a small smile. It's done, Callista. Truly done. I nodded, tears threatening but held at bay. Thank you, I whispered. The afternoon was dedicated to final preparations for the baby's arrival. I returned to the nursery to place copies of the sealed order in a small keepsake box, alongside the hand-knitted blanket and the silver locket from my mother. Each item, a symbol of victory, of support, of love, now gathered beneath the stenciled stars on the walls. My phone buzzed, a message from Emily. Flight delayed due to weather. Mom will arrive tomorrow morning. I sighed at the inconvenience, but felt gratitude that family would be present soon. Next, I attended a final rehearsal with my doula, Maria, who guided me through breathing exercises and positions for labor comfort. Each movement, side-lying, supported squats, lunges, felt like preparation for a final negotiation with my own body. As dusk fell, I stepped outside to clear my head, walking along Kensington Gardens. The paths were lined with lamps casting halos on the frosty grass. Couples strolled, dogs padded quietly, and the world felt peaceful. I paused by the Serpentine, watching waterfowl glide across the glassy surface. My reflection merged with theirs, a woman transformed by fear and fight, now poised on the threshold of motherhood. I whispered into the cold air. We're almost there. That evening, I joined my mother and Emily for a quiet dinner at home. Roasted chicken, root vegetables, and peppermint tea. Laughter came easier than it had in months. Stories shared of simpler days before the conflict consumed us. My mother raised her cup. To Callista, for courage, for love, for the bright future we're celebrating. I smiled, tears glistening. To us. ... Late at night, I returned to the nursery, now lit by a single nightlight. I placed 2 quiet lullabies on a small speaker and pressed play, soft piano melodies floating into the stillness. I lay a hand on the empty crib and another on my belly. Soon, I whispered. In 2 sleeps, you'll be here. The house was silent, the world holding its breath. Outside, snow began to fall, a gentle lullaby of its own, blanketing the city in white. In that moment of quiet triumph and tender expectation, I realized the war for our future had ended not with the sealing of a court order, but with the steady promise of life's next beginning. End of Part 18. Christmas Eve dawned crisp and clear. The sky a pale wash of blue over Notting Hill's frost-kissed rooftops. I woke before the first light, the house quiet except for the gentle patter of my heart and the faint rustle of the hand-knitted blanket draped across the nursery rocker. Today was 2 days before the baby's due date. 2 days before the world I knew would end, and a new one would begin. I slid my feet into soft slippers and padded down the hallway, pressing my hand to the nursery door. The crib lay silent in the early glow. I closed my eyes, feeling the baby's kicks, gentle reminders that life was growing stronger by the hour. Downstairs, the kettle whistled. I poured a mug of chamomile tea and settled at my oak writing desk, opening my journal to a blank page. I needed to capture this moment before the tide of change swept me away. I wrote, "Tomorrow, the world changes. I feel it in my bones, like the earth shifting beneath my feet. I have fought for this baby's future, built fortress walls of law and love. Now, the only battle left is to bring you safely into the world." I paused, brushing a tear from my cheek. ... Mid-morning found me in the kitchen, tying a ribbon around a small gift for Felix, a silver pen engraved with our initials and the date of the sealed order. He had been my steadfast ally, my counsel, my friend. He deserved something more than words of thanks. I wrapped the pen carefully and placed it atop the mantel beside the poinsettia. The room looked festive. String lights twinkling around the mantel, mistletoe hung by the door. Yet beneath the holiday magic, I felt an undercurrent of anticipation, like the moment before an orchestra begins its first note. ... At noon, my mother arrived with a flourish of her bright red coat and a bag of freshly baked mince pies. She found me in the living room, barefoot and warm in my cashmere jumper. "Come, darling," she said, pulling me into a hug. "We must do something cheerful today." We set aside my journal and drove to the antique market on Portobello Road, wandering among stalls decked in holly and tinsel. My mother insisted on handing me a sprig of mistletoe from a flower vendor. "Promise me," she teased, nudging my arm, "you'll steal a kiss under this before the baby comes." I laughed, heart lighter than it had been in weeks, and tucked the sprig into my coat pocket. ... By afternoon, I felt the first unmistakable twinge in my lower back. I paused, placing a hand on my belly. Was it Braxton Hicks, or the beginning of labor's call? I timed the sensation, 4 minutes apart. I exhaled, excitement and nerves mingling. I found my phone and called Maria, my doula. "I think something's happening," I whispered. "Stay calm," she said. "Rest, hydrate, and track the contractions. I'll be ready when you need me." I sank onto the couch, mistletoe in my pocket, mincemeat pies cooling on the coffee table. The contractions continued, gentle now but insistent. ... By dusk, the lights of Christmas Eve glowed in the windows across the street. Felix arrived, his silver pen gift in hand, eyes alight with surprise and pride. He knelt beside me, placing gentle kisses on my hand. "Merry Christmas, Callista. No matter what happens, you've given us a gift beyond measure." Tears shimmered in my eyes. I pressed the mistletoe to his coat lapel. "Promise me," I murmured. He lifted me beneath it, our lips meeting in a tender kiss, hope sealed with holiday magic. ... That night, I lay in the soft glow of the nursery nightlight, contractions now steady. 6 minutes apart, then 4, then 3. Maria arrived quietly, a calm presence. She checked my vital signs and guided me through breathing. Inhale peace, exhale tension. I closed my eyes, focusing on the rise and fall of my chest, each breath a bridge to the life moving within me. Felix stood at the doorway, supportive and gentle. My mother sat on the couch, hands clasped in quiet prayer. Outside, carolers sang faintly down the street. Inside, the world held its breath. I whispered to the darkness, pressing a hand to my belly. "Come, my love, we're ready for you." In that hush, the final threshold trembled. Tomorrow's sunrise would bring joy beyond law and lit candles, joy born of new beginnings and the sweetest victory of all. The labor pains started with an understated tremor, an almost whisper of contraction, just before dawn. I lay in the dim nursery, listening to the soft hum of machines guiding the room's warmth. The hand-knitted blanket lay folded on the crib rocker, and beside me, Felix adjusted the straps on the hospital bag. My mother hovered in the doorway, her eyes shining with anticipation and worry. "Are you ready?" Felix asked softly. His calm voice was a lifeline. I nodded, breathing deeply. "As I'll ever be. ... We arrived at St. Mary's Hospital just as the sky bled pink with morning light. The emergency lane was nearly bare at this early hour, but as we stepped inside, the corridor buzzed with nurses and the quiet urgency of the maternity ward. Maria, my doula, met us at the entrance. Her reassuring presence felt like the steady keel of a ship in storm-tossed seas. She took my hand and guided me through the admission process. Within minutes, I was settled into a soft, reclined birthing suite overlooking the hospital gardens. The midwife, Nurse Patel, checked my vitals. Blood pressure steady, baby's heartbeat strong. She nodded to Maria. "We're ready to begin whenever you are." I glanced at the clock. 6:17 a.m. The first contraction rolled through me like a wave. Urgent and unyielding, ... Hours passed in a blur of contraction and release, guided breaths and Maria's constant support. I leaned into Felix's shoulder during the peaks, his warmth unwavering. My mother played soft music quietly in the corner, songs from my childhood, lullabies I'd once sung. At noontime I felt the shift, the transition. The contractions intensified, the pain sharpening, a fire forged at my core. Yet through it I found a power, a reservoir of strength born of every battle I'd fought these past months. "Push with your next contraction," Maria instructed calmly. I gripped the end of the bed. I could taste steel on my tongue, but I clung to Maria's voice. Steady, rhythmic, ... A final, fierce push, and the room filled with light and sound. I closed my eyes, the world reduced to this moment. And then I heard it. A cry that pierced the haze, a small, perfect declaration of life. Tears streamed down my face as the midwife placed our daughter, tiny, delicate, her skin soft as dawn, on my chest. She opened her eyes, wide and luminous, and I felt my heart shatter and expand all at once. "She's beautiful," I whispered. Felix knelt beside us, his own tears gleaming. "Welcome to the world, Amelia Rose." My mother entered, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Your world is safe. ... Later, I cradled Amelia in the nursery corner of the suite, a small bassinet near the window. The room, once a battleground of pleadings and statutes, now glowed with the innocence of new beginnings. The sealed order lay inside my purse, our legal victory. But in this moment, the only victory that mattered was her breath, her heartbeat matching mine. I whispered to her, "This is your story, my love, born of our fight but living in peace." Amelia cooed, her tiny hand reaching for mine. I traced her fingers, marveling at the life we'd created. ... The next morning we returned to Notting Hill, the flat transformed by Christmas lights and the scent of fresh pine. Friends left gifts at the door, soft blankets, books, a silver rattle engraved with her name. In the nursery, I placed Amelia in the crib for a quiet nap. I stepped outside onto the balcony. the cold air bracing. London stretched below, buses trundling, pedestrians bustling, life moving forward. I closed my eyes, inhaling the scent of Christmas and new beginnings. A notification sounded on my phone. I opened it and typed a message to our subscribers. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. I set the phone aside and returned to the nursery, lifting Amelia gently. She nestled against my chest, tiny and trusting. In that peaceful moment, I knew our journey had only just begun, not with court orders or legal battles, but with the quiet magic of motherhood, a story written in every heartbeat, every breath, every tender lullaby that would echo through her life. End of Part 20.